our Justice Department and our FBI have to start doing their job and doing it right and doing it now.
These are the top people at the FBI where you had absolute dirty cops. These were dirty cops.
When everybody sees what's going on in the Justice Department, I always put justice now with quotes.
At the top, they were not clean, to put it mildly. And what they did to our country was a terrible, terrible thing.
The president's been attacking the FBI since he's been president, and it looks like he may have landed on a new target in his war on justice. The new leader of the FBI, President tweeting this weekend an attack on Chris Wray, a lifelong Republican and his own handpicked appointee. He was recommended by Donald Trump's longtime friend and ally, Chris Christie. Trump, in his tweet, first quoting Fox News commentators, then adding some of his own color, writing this, quote, "The FBI has no leadership. The director is protecting the same gang that tried to overthrow the president through an illegal coup." Trump adding that Wray was apparently recommended by the previous DOJ leadership, even though Trump supported him. Why is Director Wray in Trump's crosshairs now? Probably because of recent comments where Wray has broken ranks on some of Trump's favorite conspiracy theories. Here he is defending the origins of the Mueller investigation.
When FBI agents conduct investigations against alleged mobsters, suspected terrorists, other criminals, do you believe that they're engaging in spying when they're following FBI investigative policies and procedures?
Well, that's not the term I would use.
Do you have any evidence that any illegal surveillance into the campaigns or individuals associated with the campaigns by the FBI occurred?
I don't think I personally have any evidence of that sort.
Costa.
There's an ongoing IG investigation about the origin of the Russian probe and the whole counterintelligence operation. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, is reflecting how any institutional leader would act as there's an ongoing investigation about internal practices. He's being mum about details. He's defending the institution, not going too far. And it's Attorney General Barr who, when you talk to people inside the administration, who's really out on a limb in terms of his rhetoric and using the word like spying. Though Barr comes out of the CIA and he says that's just a word he uses, it has a charged connotation for most people in this country.
Why does Barr do that?
Well, he's someone who believes spying's not a charged word. He's testified.
Do you believe that?
I can't read his mind, but I would say he's
not a dumb man. He came out of the CIA, you just said. No one at the CIA uses, I mean, my 7-year-old uses the word spying. No one older than 7 uses the word spying.
His commentary aligns with a lot of the commentary on the right wing about the origin of the Russia investigation, that it was some kind of spy operation from the start with nefarious intentions.
And I think it's important to put this in context. The FBI has 2 missions, a criminal mission and a national security mission. When the Russian Federation, through its intelligence services, engage in unprecedented attacks against our democratic institutions, including hacking and dumping emails, including engaging in social media attacks. If the FBI didn't investigate Russia, this would be a national scandal. The entirety of the FBI would be put out to pasture. We'd be wringing our hands about why America was left undefended. The FBI must protect the United States by engaging in these investigations. Now for the president to question whether or not the investigation was predicated, whether it was lawfully overseen, whether it was legal in the first place, only emboldens one player, and that is Vladimir Putin.
The Barr testimony was amazing in that his job as Attorney General is to defend the institution, just like Chris Wray. And so he can indulge himself in political spin that makes Donald Trump happy, but he is also there to defend the hard work and the credibility of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So if you just take a step back and look at the fact that he didn't, that's quite amazing. If we look back at investigating the investigators and the origin of this, he also could have said there is an IG investigation and we'll just wait, and not indulged in the word spying, which is which is charged, and he knows it. And if you look back at sort of, Trey Gowdy when he was in office saying there would be a Mueller investigation without the Steele dossier, you listen to Senator Mark Warner, he had a breakfast with reporters last week when asked about this, he said, funny, none of the Republicans on our committee are ever leading this charge about investigating the investigators because they've seen the evidence. It's always the ones who know the least about what happened.
And it's just stunning to hear the president now attacking Chris Wray, it was not easy to find an FBI director after he smeared and maligned Jim Comey and really decimated the entire senior leadership of the FBI. To see Chris Wray, who is a close political and personal ally of one of the president's last standing outside elected officials, Chris Christie, is stunning.
And Bill Barr won't respond to the attack on Chris Wray.
Let me show you what former FBI General Counsel Jim Baker said to our own Rachel Maddow.
It's been, horrible. I mean, basically, it's I've used the word trauma to describe what happened with respect to starting with the Clinton investigation, all the way through starting the Russia investigation, the transition, the Comey firing, and the kinds of things you outlined before with Andy McCabe and everybody else. These were people that I worked with every day. These, especially with Jim Comey, I've known him for years. He's my friend. I care about him deeply. I think he's a fantastic leader. And he got fired in a way that was, terrible and in very humiliating. In a very humiliating way. And so that was really hard. It was a traumatic experience to go through. And quite frankly, having it talked about endlessly in the media doesn't help. You sort of have to relive it every day, and there's no escape because it's just on everywhere. So it's been challenging.
A former senior intelligence official said to me today, it is surreal that the Democrats are now the only party that defends the CIA and the FBI. And people say to me all the time, why are you so hard on the Democrats? You're all we've got. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, and it's so true, Nicole, because if you think about it, you go back and you see what the Republican Party used to be. It's just be about the rule of law, being a patriot, and now it is truly the party of Donald Trump. I did something which I don't recommend any of your viewers to do, which is I took about an hour or two looking at Donald Trump's Twitter feed, and it is just filled with conspiracy theory. Yeah. I mean, that's all it is, and it is attacks after attacks after attacks. And when you think about the FBI or the CIA or the intelligence community, his whole thing back again, it's loyalty to him. So he attacks them for his own personal ambition. He attacks them or says or uses them, like he is using Barr, to really attack his own political, his own political people, right? Like Biden. And so he uses it as a political arm for his own personal use, and it's no longer an independent branch. And that's just the way that this is the world that we're living in with Donald Trump.
We brushed right over the tweet that started this block, but I want to just end on it. Is there anyone in Congress that has any discomfort with Donald Trump naming Christopher Wray as an accomplice to a coup?
Every Republican I've sat down with recently, on record and off record, I've brought up the word coup. Coup d'etat is a phrase from governments being overthrown around the world. To a person, not one Republican in the top ranks of the party has showed any real discomfort with the term about the origin of the investigation. We've probed at the Post about this term. It's beyond charged. I mean, it's an incendiary term, coup. It means revolution. It means people are plotting within the government to overthrow the current government. It is out there. And it is a term Republicans nod at, and they say it's okay with us because we believe that was the way it all played out. And this is before an IG report. This is before any kind of new facts are out there on this issue.
It's stunning, A.B. I got to give you the last word on that. It's just a stunning debasement, not just to the presidency and the executive branch.
And that's the interesting evolution, is that the people like Trey Gowdy, who were still around saying, let's just let cooler heads prevail, have gone. And the ones who are staying really believe that their reelection is dependent on this type of acquiescence.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.